Braver leaders need mental space. I've learned a lot during my leadership life, and these are 2 key lessons I aim to live by. Number 1, you have to take responsibility for yourself. And by this, I mean the way you show up, how you feel, and what you need in order to be who you want to be. Number 2, if you don't carve out space for thinking and growth, you will slide backwards. The world will move on around you while you're still drawing on the same set of experiences, the same set of tools, and most critically, the same thinking. Both of these leadership lessons take courage and commitment, and sometimes you need to swim against the tide, ignore common practice and expectation, and do things your own way. If you've listened to my emotional agility talk, you'll know we learn what we can share from a very early age, what emotions are acceptable, and how we should feel based on the responses we get from people. We then spend a lifetime reinforcing what we think we know. The challenge is that this emotion, how we think we should feel, then influences how we behave, what we talk about, and what we hide. In reality, all emotion is valuable. It's just data, but it's super powerful data because it can change our neurochemistry, which impacts how we feel, for better and for worse. We don't normally feel strong emotions about things we don't care about, because emotions are there to alert us to danger or threat, or to let us know that all is well, we're connected and safe. When you become overstimulated, and I'm not talking about the buzzy caffeine type stimulation, I'm talking about that always on feel, the busy brains, overthinking, 24/7 connection to work, then you start to react as if you're under threat. You feel strong emotion over stuff that probably doesn't really matter that much, and you stop differentiating between threat and non-threat because everything becomes urgent and overwhelm is on its way. Of course, you can't say anything because your job is to cope. You are the leader, so you spin plates, you push down your emotions, and heaven forbid that you have to ask for any help. Now, I know I'm painting an extreme picture here, but remember, we learn what to share and what not to share. And it's possible that you're similar to a third of people in Dr. Susan David's research on emotion. You judge yourself harshly for negative emotions like anger or sadness, and you try to hide them until you can't. When you're absorbing but not processing, eventually that emotion comes out somewhere, most likely in a disproportionate response to someone or something. You know, that last straw that induced an angry outburst or a complete meltdown, it's not a good leadership look. To be fair, we all feel like this occasionally, and sometimes circumstances are such that it's not unreasonable to feel overwhelmed or a little out of control. When this happens, you need to be brave enough to acknowledge it, interrogate it, and deal with it, and not just push it down until you spiral. I know that sounds obvious, but the number of people, groups, and even whole teams I see in a state of perpetual overwhelm is heartbreaking. This is not complicated. When you know what you're like at your best, and when you've identified how you want to show up and feel, then you start to notice when you're not at your best, and none of us are all of the time. What's important is we learn where our trigger points are and when we might be in danger of making it harder for ourselves or even causing harm. So acknowledge you're not at your best and then interrogate why. What's going on? What's triggering your feelings? And is it something temporary? Is it appropriate for your circumstances? Or do you need to course adjust and take action to help process or change the way you're feeling? None of us are happy-clappy on top of the world all of the time. None of us are immune to difficult situations, conversations and emotions, especially when we regularly engage with other humans. And none of us are immune to occasional feelings of stress and anxiety, unless we're living a life of quiet mediocrity and staying firmly in our comfort zone. And this is not the vibe of any braver leader that I know. So you've interrogated it, you may understand what's going on, you know it's transient, and you know your way through. All good. Try to be kind to yourself and make sure that you make space for things that refuel you when you can. If, on the other hand, you're feeling overwhelmed, overstimulated, and out of control, you need to deal with it. You can't let it drift and hope that it gets better on its own. My number one tip here is stop. Give yourself some mental space. Most of us find it easier to stay in the doing or busy cycle in terms of leadership. This is a really bad move. Emotion and feeling enable you to process what you experience, to heal if you need to, and to create useful future neurological patterns. When you deny yourself or your team the mental space to just be, you also reduce your capacity for resilience, tolerance, compassion, and a whole load of other helpful neurological responses. Remember, we're made up of a whole lot of physiological response driven by neurochemical reactions to our emotions and feelings. They absolutely influence how we experience the world, for good and bad. When you interrogate those feelings on a regular basis, and particularly when you feel out of kilter, you start to process what you're experiencing and declutter your mind of ambient emotion, like fear, frustration, and overwhelm. Then stress reduces, creativity and productivity increase, and you're more likely to feel satisfied with your lot. You'll feel the benefits of this both at home and at work. Stop, take time to acknowledge, interrogate, and deal with what you find. These are my top 3 things to help you create mental space. Start with yourself, choose what to focus on, and stay connected. Start with yourself. Leaders often need reminding that you can't save someone else if you're already drowning yourself. It's not selfish to prioritise your own needs most of the time. Most impactful people do. When you're at your best, you have more to give, and you're probably nicer to be around. Know what grounds you, what energises you, and what depletes you, and then strike a balance of each, or at least define a workable range in which you know you can function. Remember that resilience is not about toughing it out or about doing more with less. It's about rest, refueling, and maintenance. The better you get at these, the further you can go. Our people model our behaviour much more readily than they do what we say, so lead by example and not with your mouth. This often means managing yourself first. We all need space to be, to recalibrate and to reconnect with ourselves, and sometimes with each other at work. Don't be afraid to diarise this. Ritual's really important to us, and whether you believe it or not, we all use rituals all of the time to get through everyday life. Consider how you brush your teeth, or the order in which you do things in the morning, and how out of sorts you might feel if you've had to skip a step or two because you were late. It's all ritual. Maybe you like a morning coffee on the way to work, or a lunchtime walk, or even a favourite playlist to decompress on the way home. It's all ritual. Our brains work on pattern recognition and repetitive action. That's the only way we get to process all that we experience. Your rituals and routines are there to keep you connected, safe, and calm. They're also a really quick way to ground yourself in moments of anxiety. Ritual works because it's consistent, repetitive action. It's often linked to sensory stimulus of some sort, so smell, feel, taste, as well as sound and vision. It's also very personal, so what you might find calming and grounding might not work for me, and vice versa. For some, ritual is traditional meditation or mantra. For others, it's running, gardening, being out in nature, reading a good book with your favourite cup of tea. It might even be a checklist before you start a task. Trust yourself and use what feels right for you. Choose what you focus on. Most of us are quite unintentional. We drift through life, particularly at work, dealing with what crops up, reacting to others, and hopefully working down our ever-increasing to-do list as we go. You might also be listening to a harsh inner critic, a voice in your head, making comparisons, giving you a running commentary on how you're doing or how you compare to others, or even what others might be thinking about you. It's exhausting. Creating some mental space allows you to slow down, to interrogate what's going on, and to decide what is helpful to focus on. It may be the actual job that you're doing. It may be your narrative or self-talk. Would something kinder serve you better? Whether you choose it or not, your prevailing emotion impacts your physiology. When these emotions are fear-based or judgmental, you're likely to have less cognitive processing power, less compassion, and feel less connected. None of these are good for your mental well-being. Choosing to consciously focus on the things you can impact helps you to calm your nervous system, which recalibrates your neurochemistry, helping you to feel more in control. You notice what you consciously focus on, and this impacts how you feel. So stay focused on the things that you want in your life, not the things that are wrong or that you don't want. Most of us have a negativity bias, so often this takes some self-training and conscious effort. Remember, you always have some choice, even if it's only of your own attitude. You can control how you show up and what you bring by way of energy. You can't control others' reactions or behaviour. But when you choose your own based on what's important for you, it can feel really powerful. Make sure you know who you want to be, not just what you want to do, and how you want to feel, behave, and impact the world. When you know, you start to notice when you're aligned to that and when you're not. Expending energy on things you have no influence over sometimes feels good. You can vent, but you're never going to have to deliver on what you say. A bit like a political party with no chance of being elected. And that's okay occasionally, but do it too often or make it your default, and you'll increase your sense of powerlessness and potentially exacerbate any overwhelm. Mental space is about slowing down, deciding what to focus on, and therefore how to act. Stay connected. Have you ever noticed that when there's a big crisis, people crawl out of the woodwork to be part of it, don't they? The pandemic was a great example of this. At the beginning, all sorts of people offered all sorts of help, much of which faded as we started to normalise what we were experiencing. The human need to be connected or belong is incredibly powerful in terms of mental well-being. From an evolutionary perspective, it makes us safer, it gives us focus, purpose, and a sense of control. All are important for regulating our neurochemistry and therefore our physical state. Serving, contributing, and helping others makes us feel safer, provided you've got the personal reserve to do this. Remember that humans are social creatures. Most of us don't fare well in prolonged isolation. Make time for social interaction and connection with your fellow humans in and out of work. You don't need to share your innermost secrets, but finding points of connection with people will pay dividends in terms of engagement and mental well-being. When you feel connected, it's also much easier to stay present or in the moment. You're less likely to be bothered by intrusive thoughts or distracted by a list of things that need your attention. Notice when and where you feel most connected and present and what the ingredients of that connection are. Simply put, go slow if you want to grow. Mental space is necessary for you to process, learn, and be at your best.